بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الصلاة كانت على المؤمنين كتابا موقوتا وقال تعالى وكلوا واشربوا حتى يتبين لكم الخيط الأبيض من الخيط الأسود من الفجر وأتموا الصيام إلى الليل وقال النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام من رأى منكم منكرا فليغيره بيده صدق الله العظيم وصدق رسوله الكريم أما بعد. Now, alhamdulillah, it's a great blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We've had this opportunity to alhamdulillah, do this presentation. Alhamdulillah, we've been right across the country explaining this issue. And alhamdulillah, over the last few years, we've seen lots of Masajid understand this issue and actually rethink the way they consider Salah times. And this is a very, very important issue. If we just look at the issue of Salah times and we see the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed it upon Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, we'll appreciate how important it is. Sometimes people talk about, we've got all these other issues in society, we've got zina, we've got shamelessness, we've got all these things widespread in society. Why are we focusing on Salah? Why are we focused on Salah times? If we see the words in the Quran, Allah Ta'ala mentions quite clearly that Salah is the solution to fahisha. Salah is the solution to open sinning. It's clearly mentioned in the Quran. If we see the hadith of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and we see the way Allah Ta'ala revealed Salah times to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, we see Allah Ta'ala sent Salah times in a very special way. The hadith is recorded in Tirmidhi, where it's mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the greatest angel, Jibreel alayhi salam, to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam for 2 continuous days. On the first day he would come at the beginning time of Salah, on the second day he would come at the ending time of Salah. And he didn't just say the times and tell him the times, rather he led the Salah. So imagine the Salah, where Jibreel alayhi salam is the Imam, the Muqtadi is the greatest Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and this Salah was performed in front of the Kaaba. So this inshallah, I will go through the whole hadith with you later. But just for those people who are thinking, what's the point of this talk? Why can't we talk about more important issues? There is nothing more important than Salah. There is nothing more important than worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And to worship Allah ta'ala, we must do it properly. The verse of the Quran I recited to you was that Inna salata tanha al-fahsha wal-munkar. So I do recite that, and Inna salata kana ala mu'minin kitaban mawquta. That certainly Salah has been prescribed for you at set times, at fixed times. So any kind of notion that actually there's separate 1 and separate 2, or there's 2 different subasadic times, all those notions should be forgotten. Because the verse of the Quran are quite clear in this, that there's one Fajr time. There's a particular time, and that is when people should stop eating. And that is when Salat al-Fajr begins. So any kind of other notions, we should forget that completely. Okay? Now, crucial, during the talk, it's very important that we keep respect of all parties. If we see in the past, the ulama had differences of opinion, but that respect was always there. They respected one another, and that respect remains. However, we're discussing the issue here. What are the issues? Why is it a problem? And what have our ulama right from the past said about this issue? Okay. Now, first, in terms of responsibility, we see the hadith of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He starts to state, "Talabul ilmi fardiyatun ala kulli muslim." That seeking knowledge is compulsory on every believer. So therefore, it's important for us to understand. I understand all those things that apply to us. The hadith of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, they only make sense when you see what the fuqaha said. Ibn Abdullah Shami rahimahullah, he explains this, and he says what this means. He explains this in his words. It is compulsory for every person to know all the injunctions that apply to his daily life, so that he can stay away from haram. That means if you're involved in a particular business or particular industry, then although it's not necessary for everyone to know about that industry, about what's halal, about what's haram about it, if you're involved in it, then it becomes compulsory for you to know all the masail about it. In the same way, all those things that apply to your daily life, you must know about. Salah is one of those things. Salah is compulsory on every pubert, every baligh, male and female. So therefore, for that person, for every person to know how to perform wudu, what time to read Salah, all these things. You don't even know the whole intricacies of it. And that hadith behind, you don't need to know all that, but how to do it, how, and what time things are, those things are important. And that is why we're educating people. The idea with this, if we see the message of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and we see the verse in the Quran, we see that Allah Ta'ala sent Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam with different jobs and different duties. You know, one of the duties was يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتٍ. That Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam recite the verses on the Muslims and non-Muslims. They understood Arabic then. This was a form of da'wah. He used to call them by reciting the verse of the Quran. Another duty of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was yuzakkihim, was to purify people and give them advices that will make them better people. And the third thing that we're going to focus on today was yu'allimuhum al-kitab wa hikmah, and he used to teach them, educate them. And this is a crucial part of deen. Sometimes we get worried sometimes with certain masajid because they're speaking about something else. Understand, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had different duties. All of these are part of his deen. It's not like this is the only work. This is also work. So da'wah, tazkiyah and ta'aleem, these are crucial parts of deen. And we should understand that and appreciate that. Move on, inshallah. I'm looking at the time because right now obviously there's no rush. Because alhamdulillah it's a time we can pick that no one will ever rush because we can't eat it anyway. So inshallah, but what I will try and do, I'll try and finish about 15 minutes before we start inshallah, to give us plenty of time to do that. Now, the two things I'm going to go through today, and this is the major thing. Two claims I'm making today. The first claim I'm making is that 18 degrees is the time that ulama from around the world have approved for at least the last 1,000 years. That's the claim I'm making. Obviously, it's upon me, al-hujjatu ala al-mudda'i. It's crucial for me to give you that proofs for that. And that's what I intend to do, inshallah. So that's my first claim. The 18 degrees is the time ulama from around the world, not just UK, not just the Arab world, not just the Asian world. We're saying across the world, have approved for the time of Fajr. And also, I'm not saying it's today, or last week, or last year. I'm saying there's evidences and texts that go back 1,000 years saying that. So this is not something new at all. The second thing I'm saying is that the timetable that's been adopted in some Masajid since 1989, and other Masajid last year, by the name of a unified London timetable, or whatever other name you want to think of for it, does not meet the same conditions. And those scholars who have scrutinized it, I will tell you about the fatwa of Muftaqi Uthmani, I will tell you the fatwa of other madaris, I will give you fatwa from the Arab world, all about that particular timetable, explain that those people who have actually scrutinized that timetable have found it is not acceptable according to Sharia. And those are two bold claims, inshallah, and those two claims is what the whole talk will be about, inshallah. Can you move on, inshallah? Now, first thing we've got about Fajr time. Now, the crucial thing here, this is just a chart I found on Google, but you can see here, can you get rid of the echo? Is that possible? I don't know, it's just really irritating for me. I'm not sure about everyone else. So anyway, you can get rid of the echo. Is that just the mic? Okay. So here what you've got is a 5 Salat. Now you can see here that one represents Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib and Isha. So what we're basically saying here is, one, Fajr, you can read it from as soon as the first light appears in the sky up to sunrise. That is the Fajr time. So we're going to discuss what time is this here. What time is this here? We'll also talk a little bit about Isha time later on as well. But that's what we're discussing. What time is this here? What time does Fajr begin? If someone's going to fast, what time should they stop eating? Obviously, to read Fajr, you can read any time from the beginning time right up to sun. Obviously, you shouldn't delay it up to sunrise, but before that, that is the time of validity. So we're not discussing when we should read namaz. We're discussing when does Fajr time start, and when should we stop eating. That's the discussion we're having. Move on, inshallah. Okay, now basically what I'm going to do with this, I'm going to be discussing a few things. First thing, let's look at the Quran, let's look at the Hadith, let's look at history. So if we understand all of that, then we can talk about the modern scholars' views and then discuss how it applies to us today. And then we'll compare that with the other timetable. So first, the verse of the Quran is quite clear in this. So وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَكُمُ الْخَيْطُ الْأَبْيَضُ مِنَ الْخَيْطِ الْأَسْوَدِ مِنَ الْفَجْرِ. That Allah Ta'ala states, eat and drink, it's before a fasting person, eat and drink until the white thread becomes clear from the black thread of Fajr. Okay? Now what does that mean? Imam Qurtubi and other scholars explain this. The whiteness refers to the first white visible light in the sky that eventually spreads horizontally. So we're talking about the first white light that spreads horizontally. Now, when does that start? We'll discuss the issues with that. But understand this first, that we're talking about a white light that appears, that spreads horizontally. It's not a vertical light. That's different. That's different. We're going to come to that. Can you move on? This is normally a 2-hour presentation. I haven't got 2 hours, so I'm going to try and move it. We'll skip that, inshallah. Okay, now, Subah Salih and Subah Qadib, these are some pictures I've got here. It's important we understand this. So you can see Subah Qadib, alhamdulillah, we observed this last year in Woolton and Nays. Subah Qadib you can't see every single day. If you look at the detailed accounts of astronomers, also the fuqaha, they've come to realize that Subah Qadib you can only observe it certain times of the year. The astronomers say in the UK, you can observe it twice. At the first week of spring and the first week of autumn. So last year, alhamdulillah, we observed this. Okay, and it's like a vertical line. So you can see it's almost like a pyramid almost. Okay, almost like a pyramid. The crucial thing here is, you can see it's just white here. The Subah Sadiq, you can see some tinges of red there. So slightly different. And also you can see here, the light is horizontal. So it's spread across the horizon. And that's important, that's the difference here. Some people have said, those people who talk about 18 degrees have actually observed this instead of observing this. Now, that, if anyone says that, it shows actually they don't know the difference. Because Subah Qadib and Subah Salih are two very different lights. Let's look at it in detail. Can you move on, Sean? Now, if we see that hadith of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam explains this. There's that hadith mentioned here, we explain this. Let's look at the second hadith, because we haven't got time. Al-Fajr al-Fajran. That there's 2 types of Fajr, 2 types of Subah. Okay? فَأَمَّا الْفَجْرُ الَّذِي يَكُونُ كَذَنَبِ سَرْحَانٍ. As for the Fajr that appears like the tail of a fox, فَلَا يُحِلُّ الصَّلَاةِ. It does not make Fajr Salah binding. وَلَا يُحْرِمُ الطَّعَامِ. Nor does it make eating haram. So this is talking about Subah Salih. Subah Qadib. So before Fajr time, there's 2 types of Fajr, there's 2 types of Subah light. The first light is known as Subah Qadib. Subah Qadib is like a pyramid-like light. Okay? When that happens, we can't read Fajr namaz, and we can continue eating. The second Fajr is after that Fajr, that pyramid, what happens is we've observed this, that it diminishes, it becomes darker afterwards. And then that light appears, which becomes horizontal. That is Subah Salih. When that appears, Nabi Sallallahu states, وَأَمَّا الْفَجْرُ الَّذِي يَظْهَرُ مُسَدِّنًا. The light that goes horizontally, فِي الْأُفُقِ فَإِنَّهُ يُحِلُّ الصَّلَاةِ. That is the light which makes Salat al-Fajr binding. Then we have to read Fajr after that. Okay? And also it makes food haram. So again, let me just recap over this. Let me move on to the next slide. We'll recap over this. So we've spoken about 2 Subah so far. We've spoken about Subah Qadib. It's like the pyramid-like light. There's no Salah at that time. Fajr doesn't start. Continue eating. Okay? As I said to you, in the UK, astronomers say you see it twice a year. Maybe you see it first week of spring, first week of autumn. What I didn't add was, you can only see that light if conditions are perfect. If you've got a full moon there, you won't see it. If you've got lots of light pollution, you won't see it. It's a very faint light. It's very difficult to see. And that's important there. And also, as Subah Sadiq, it comes later than that. And that is that first light, which eventually spreads horizontally. It's just different. Ibn Uthaymeen said, has written a fatwa where he explains 3 differences between Subah Qadib and Subah Salih. The first thing he says, you can read the Arabic, I'll just translate it underneath so you can see it, is that Subah Salih spreads horizontally, Qadib spreads vertically. Okay? Number 2, it says after Subah Qadib, it gets darker. It gets darker and darker and darker. And that's why when people say that those people who are observing 18 degrees have observed Subah Qadib, it cannot be correct, simply because those people, I don't know, we've been to observe, and I'll talk about more observations later, but when you observe, you don't just turn up at 2 in the morning and just leave after 2:15. You stay there, you observe for a few hours, or at least half an hour to an hour. So if you observe it for that period of time, Subah Qadib is very clear, because it's a light that appears, and then it goes away, it disappears. Subah Sadiq is different. After Subah Sadiq, it becomes brighter and brighter and brighter. So there's a difference. One after one, it becomes darker. After the other one, it becomes brighter. So never should the 2 be mixed up. The second thing is, Subah Sadiq is, again, it's linked to the horizon. So when you observe it, when you're looking at the coast, or you're looking towards the coast, it's actually there by the horizon. The white thread is distinct from the black. The black refers to the shadow of the earth. I'll explain that later as well. But Subah Qadib is actually detached from the horizon. It's actually away from the horizon. And Subah Qadib, another thing that I haven't explained, is that Subah Qadib is not linked to where the sun is in relation to the earth. So what Subah Qadib actually is actually a reflection of the Milky Way. So it's to do with where the stars are at that time. So therefore it's got nothing to do with Fajr at all. And that's important, we appreciate that. And those who have observed it appreciate this. We'll move on, okay, I've explained it. Now, next question is, so we've explained so far, Subah Qadib and Subah Salah. I've said Subah Qadib, no Salah, continue eating. Subah Isba Sadiq, Salah starts, stop eating. Okay? Now the question is, when does it start? Because amongst the ulama in the past, there's been two opinions. The first opinion is that when that first light appears, which eventually spreads horizontally, that's when Fajr time starts. That in the technical terms is known as ghalas. Ghalas means when it's basically dark. The first light appears, it spreads, it's known as ghalas. Then the other word is isfar. Some people call it tabayyun or tagyinu or whatever else. Isfar is when that whiteness spreads in a row, when you can see the whiteness clearly in the sky. So you've got two views here. The question here, this is important, that if anyone's going to observe Fajr, then you should know, what are they looking for? Are they looking for that first light? Or are they looking for when it spreads? That's important. So let's look at the ahadith with regards to this, and also the fatwa on this as well, this is important. So when does Fajr start? Does it start out ghalas? Does it start isfar? Okay. Before I go into the hadith, it's important that I'm not talking about the best time to read Salat al-Fajr. Because there's a difference. Imam Hanifa rahimahullah says that you read it when it's still, when there's a bit of bright outside, asfiru bil fajr. Imam Shafi, Imam Malik, Imam Ahmad say you read it when it's dark. So that preferable times, we're not discussing now. We're talking about when does Fajr start. Okay, so if we look at the hadith of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, let's look at the second hadith, where it's mentioned, it's a hadith of Sahih Muslim, where Nabi Sallallahu, where it's mentioned, وَالصُّبْحُ كَانَ أي الصحابة أو قال كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يصليها بغلس. That Fajr time, the Sahaba used to perform Fajr, or the narrator has a slight doubt whether the person said, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to perform Fajr at the time of Ghalas, when it was dark. If Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam performed Fajr at this time, then for anyone to say Fajr began afterwards, then there'll be an issue with that. So here you're seeing quite clearly, Hadith Sahih Muslim, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam stating, or the narrator states that the Sahaba, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam performed Fajr when it was dark. Next hadith, which comes in Bukhari, when Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam states, the Sahabi states, وَالصُّبْحُ كَانَ النَّبِيُّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ يُصَلِّيهَا بِغَلَسٍ. That Subh, Fajr, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam to perform it when it was dark, at ghalas. So when I say dark, it doesn't mean it's completely pitch black, it's not night time. It's that first light has appeared, but it hasn't spread completely in the atmosphere yet. So it's still dark in that respect. How dark? So we read the hadith of Sahih Muslim, where it mentions, فَأَقَامَ الْفَجْرِ, as Fajr used to begin, حِينَ انشَقَّ الْفَجْرِ. When Fajr began, انشَقَّ is a verb generally used for when something breaks open or cracks open or splits. So it splits, that first thing that appears. So here, when Fajr appeared straight away, then aqam al-Fajr, Fajr would be, would start. And it was so dark, وَالنَّاسُ لَا يَكَادُ يَعْرِفُ بَعْضُهُم بَعْضًا. And it was so dark that people could hardly see each other. That's how dark it was. It wasn't bright. We get mixed up because sometimes we think it's dark because we're not outside. If you're outside, there's no street lights, then when there's actual whiteness in the sky, it does become quite light. But we're kind of immune to that because we're inside. So you can see from that it was so dark that people could hardly see each other. Move on, inshallah. This hadith is crucial. This is the hadith of Jibreel that I mentioned to you at the beginning. That Allah Ta'ala sent Jibreel alayhi salam down for 2 days, 2 consecutive days. On the first day he came at the beginning time of Salah, and the second day the end time of Salah. And we can see about Fajr Salah, the first day when he came, ثُمَّ صَلَّى الْفَجْرِ. Jibreel alayhi salam performed Fajr, حِينَ بَرَقَ الْفَجْرِ. When Fajr appeared, when Fajr began, when that light first appeared, this is crucial here. And also what's important is the next word of the hadith. And this is a time وَحَرُّمَ الطَّعَامُ عَلَى الصَّائِمِ. This is when it becomes haram to stop eating for a fasting person. I've got that in red. So it's not like there's a difference here. Sometimes people bring narrations of Sahaba continuing to eat. Some people say there's a hadith where the companions continued to eat right up to when it was very, very bright. All those things. If we look at what the muhaddithin have said about this, they have said as soon as the verse of the Quran was revealed, وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَكُمُ الْخَيْطُ الْأَبْيَضُ مِنَ الْخَيْطِ الْأَسْوَدِ مِنَ الْفَجْرِ. That abrogated all those practices. This is mentioned it's mentioned by Imam Tahawi rahimahullah, also mentioned by Imam Razi rahimahullah. So it's mentioned, if you look at Umdul Qari, you will see the different narrations about this, that those people who have said you can continue eating afterwards, that is abrogated with a verse in the Quran. We carry on, Isha. Now, there are also ahadith about Isfar, about Fajr begins when the whiteness spreads. For example, the hadith of Tirmidhi comes to mind, أَسْفِرُوا بِالْفَجْرِ فَإِنَّهُ أَعْظَمُ لِلْأَجْرِ. That perform Fajr when it's really bright outside. This is the best time for Fajr. So there is a view that Fajr begins when it's much brighter. However, if we see the view and the opinion of Ibn Qudama rahimahullah and also of Moulana Yusuf bin Nur rahimahullah, both their views, if we see what Ibn Qudama says, Ibn Qudama rahimahullah mentioned that Ash'ari al-Waqf Ibn Qudama ila al-ijma' fi hadhihi al-mas'ala. He says this is such a mas'ala where there's a consensus. Everyone says Fajr begins when it's dark and that first light appears. Ibn Qudama mentions this. Moulana Yusuf bin Nur rahimahullah goes one step further and he says if a person continues to eat until it becomes bright, then he has to make qadha of his fast. This is how clearly it's mentioned. So this is important. And it says, وَهَذَا إِجْمَعٌ لَمْ يُخَالِفْ فِيهِ إِلَّا الْأَعْمَشِ وَحْدَ فَشَلْتَ. He said, this is such a consensus that no one has argued with it, except for A'mash, who's a great scholar, but he stood alone with this issue. The majority of the scholars throughout the ages have said, Fajr begins at that first light. That's when it begins. So, what we've discussed so far, I'm moving fast because I know it does take a little while to get through all of this. Okay? It's first thing we've discussed about Fajr. Fajr begins at the time of Subah. Now, Subah, two types. We say it's a Subah Qadhi, that pyramid-like shape, false dawn. We say Fajr doesn't start then. Also, you can continue eating at that time. I also mentioned that at that time, that light, it's got nothing to do with the sun, it's more a reflection of the stars. So therefore it's not linked to Fajr. I also explained that we've observed this as well. We observed it way before 18 degrees, just to make that clear as well. Subah Sadiq is the Fajr we're talking about. This is the Fajr, this is when the fast begins. This is when, if you want, the night ends and the day begins. It's important we understand this. Now, the question then is with Subah Sadiq is when exactly is it? Is it al-ghalas, that first light, or is it when it spreads? I've shown you the fatawa of the ulama, Bushayn al-Hadith. The fact that Nabi Sallallahu performed it at the first light means that it can't begin after that. We can't say Nabi Sallallahu performed Fajr and continue eating. That wouldn't make sense logically. So therefore, and that is the view of the scholars. A minority view of that when it completely spreads. However, it is a very small minority. Carry on. Okay. Now let's go into the science part of it now. So what I've done so far, I've explained to you the verse of the Quran, the hadith, the discussion there. Now in terms of science, the reason why we've got issues is because around us, on planet Earth, we have an atmosphere. If there was no atmosphere, then as soon as the sun would set, it'd be dark straight away. But because we have an atmosphere, the sun's rays stays in the atmosphere for a little while. So we see that in the colours in the sky, we see the oranges, the pinks, the reds, we see the white fading, all that is because of the atmosphere around us. So the question here is for us, is that we all know that when the sun goes down, that's Maghrib time, that's sunset. No one doubts that. The question is, when do all those colours disappear? For Isha time. And for Fajr, when do those colours first appear? Because when those colours first appear, that's Fajr time. And that's what we're going to discuss. You move on, Isha. Now, you've got, I'm going to skip this one. Okay, now, this is the important thing we understand this first. When we're talking about 18 degrees, firstly, Now, these calculations are based on actual observations. Some people say that one group of people made observations, the other group made no observations. It's not true. Observations have been done, and they've been done for at least 1,000 years, and we have observation reports from across the world. So that's not true at all. So it's not observation versus calculation. It's observations which show 80 degrees against observation which shows something else. Okay? And the second thing is, and this calculation has been used for more than 1,000 years, and prayer times we can use calculations. No one will say, it's not like the moon, the moon of Ramadan, where if no one sees in a whole community, no one sees, then we say, okay, we can't start Ramadan, we're going to finish off 30 days. No one sees on 29th of Ramadan, we say, you know what, we can't be. But if no one saw this, if no one saw Fajr time happen, no one said, oh, you don't have to be Fajr, no one saw it. No one would say that. This is a difference here. If no one saw sunset, people would still eat for iftar. Look at the timetable, it's different. So therefore, I don't think we should get confused between the two. Okay? The last thing is, this is the Muslim World League, when they were asked a question about when Fajr began for people of Belgium, they said 18 degrees. Also, when Mufti Uthmani was asked for the people of North America, he said it is the view of 99% of the ulama that Fajr time begins at 18 degrees. So it's Mufti Uthmani. So this is something that I think I always start off with, because this is important. That first we understand that it's not just calculations, it's also not something new. It's based on actual observation. We've actually been out and looked at it and seen the sky. Okay? And those things are important. Also, it's not something that, these youngsters have come up with something new right now. Yeah? The muftis around the world have approved this. This is important to understand. So what is 18 degrees? This is something we've got to understand as well. Now, imagine, I'm going to use this to make it easier. Okay, so everyone can see this. Now, imagine this is the horizon. This is basically where we walk. So this is the surface of the earth. Now, we know when we can start seeing the sun, start seeing the sun starts to rise, we say that is sunrise. And that is 0 degrees. So the sun is 0 degrees, as in it's level with where we're standing. Okay? Now the question is here, is how far below the horizon does the sun have to be for us to see that first white light? For us to see that first light, where does the sun have to be? Is it here, here, here? And in terms of angles, obviously those who haven't used a protractor will go home and look for one. But as in if you've seen using a protractor, the angles show. So the scholars have said, we're talking about 18 degrees, so when the sun is here, when the sun is about here, 18 degrees to the horizon, the scholars have said that is when that first light appears. Okay? That's what we're talking about. I'll explain that again. So sunrise, what we're saying, is sunrise is when the level to the horizon is the sun. The question here is, for Fajr time, is how far below this does the sun have to be for us to see the first light? So obviously the sun is coming up this way. Okay, so it's coming up. Where does it have to be for us to see the first white light? That's the question. Okay, and that's what we're discussing. So this is what 18 degrees actually means. This is another diagram. It shows you about darkness. This is taken from the science website. All it shows is that this is for Isha time, but it's symmetrical, so it's the same. So when the sun goes down, when it goes to 6 degrees, you still got some light there. 12 degrees, still some light there. And astronomical twilight, 18 degrees when you get completely dark skies. Okay, so it's not something new or something like that. Go on, carry on. Now, the whole question here with this is, where's this from? Obviously, there's nowhere in the hadith or the Quran says, perform Fajr when the sun is 18 degrees below the horizon. So it's not something that's in the Quran. It's not something in the hadith. So where is it from? And this is where we start going to Muslim history. We start appreciating our scholars. We see our scholars, they weren't just experts of Sharia. They were experts of astronomy. They were experts of mathematics. They were experts of lots of different fields. And they were concerned about our worship and our ibadah, about how it would make it easy for people to work out later on. And this is where you'll see this. We move on. So we look through history and we see when do we find 18 degrees first mentioned? And we find the earliest date 317 Hijri. So over 1,000 years ago. That's important. Let me show you a few opinions. We see At-Tawsi in 672 Hijri. So he says, وَقَدْ عُلِمَ بِالرَّصْدِ. That this is important to understand. It has become known بالرصد through observations, not just calculation. بالرصد is through observations. أول الفجر وآخر الشفق يكون وقت انحطاط الشمس عن الأفق 18 درجة. That the beginning of Fajr and the time when the whiteness fades from the sky for Isha occurs when the sun goes below the horizon by 18 degrees. This is 672 Hijri. We see Al-Qazi Zada in 840, he says the same thing. إذا كان انحطاط الشمس 18 جزءا. Same thing. Al-Bayruni in 440, again the same thing. He's saying 18 degrees. Again, he's talking about rust, observation. As-Sufi 376, even earlier, again speaking about 18 degrees. You move on, Sean. We see Ibn Zurqala 493, again talking about 18 degrees. So then also this new model is turned up and talking about these issues. It's not new at all, it's very old. The problem is when we move away from the traditions of our ulama and move away from that, that's when people have issues. Okay? Al-Battani 317, again 18 degrees. And there's lots of these. You move on, I'll show you a table that I've made of this. And it's a table of the scholars in the past. Al-Battani 317 says Fajr begins at 18 degrees. Al-Bayruni 440, 18 degrees. Ibn Zurqala 493. Al-Tawsi 672. Al-Aslami 693. Al-Qazi Zada 840. And you can go through. Some scholars have even said 19 degrees or 20. So you think 105 is earlier. Try working at 19 degrees. Okay? It's even earlier. Now, what I'm basically saying is if you look through history, you find someone called David King. He went through 500 manuscripts on Fajar Salah, and he said he could find no evidence of anyone saying the beginning of Fajr was before 18 degrees. He found evidence of 20, 21 degrees, and he says 15 was unheard of. Isn't it historically? Now we hear about it all the time. But historically it was unheard of. And that's important we understand this. We move on, children. Move on. Okay. This is, in 1984 there was a meeting in Regent's Park Masjid. Now in Regent's Park Masjid for 2 days they called a conference where they called scholars from all over the world to discuss and debate this issue. At the end of that meeting in 1984, they agreed that Fajr time would be at 18 degrees. There was another meeting in Regent's Park Masjid last year where they changed that view. However, that meeting, where it was an exclusive meeting, where 5 masjid representatives were there. Alhamdulillah, we've spoken to a lot of the people that were there. We asked them questions, and they said, no, we actually don't know the details about this. Yet, decision in 1984 was made with lots of scholars being present, lots of experts from all different fields talking about it. Last year, decision was made. When you speak to them in detail and they say it's more convenient for people. But let's move on, Sean. Now, what about modern scholars? What modern calculation methods? Those of you who use iPhone apps and use other applications on phones or computers are probably aware of the first 4 organisations you've got there. So you've got the University of Islamic Sciences, Karachi, you've got ISNA, Muslim World League, Qura. Last one you won't have heard of, it's not mentioned. But Muslim World, University of Islamic Sciences, 18 degrees for Isha and for Fajr. Now, ISNA, on most applications, it says their view is 15 degrees. We emailed them last year, and they've said that their view now is 18, and it has been for the last 2 years. What they're trying to do is inform people who make this application that they should now change ISNA's method from 15 to 18. So ISNA, we have emails, and those of you who want to see that can speak to me at the end. I'll show you the emails, inshallah. So ISNA's view is now 18, no longer 15. Muslim World League, based in Makkah Mukarramah, their view for Fajr is 18. For Isha, it's earlier, but I'll discuss that later. Qura, which is University in Makkah, their view is 19, so even earlier. Egyptian General Organisation surveying is 19.5 degrees, which is even earlier than that. So you can see from here that modern scholars and modern organisations have followed 18 degrees almost right through. And 15 and 12 degrees have not been used. Go carry on. So, and these are ulama from India and Pakistan who supported 18 degrees. We see Mufti Taqi Uthmani says, Fajr begins when the sun is 18 degrees below the horizon. This has been confirmed both on a scientific and religious basis. Research has been carried out. In another fatwa, those of you who want to see his fatwa, because some people, even last year, spread a rumour saying Mufti Usman has changed his view to 15 degrees. We emailed him after that, and he said, my view hasn't changed. So if you want to see his view, visit albalagh.net, which is a website which has his articles on there. You will see his view for Fajr remains on 18 degrees. Mufti Usman, another thing he mentioned is that some people have spread rumours about him in Pakistan saying his view is 15 degrees. His view isn't. And we have emails from him saying that quite clearly. Also, the other views, if we look back through Delvin history, we see Sheikh al-Hin 100 years ago, his view was 18 degrees. Khalid Ahmad Saharanpuri, again 18 degrees. Mashri Tahani in Darul Fatawa, those people want to look it up, volume 1, page 113, his view is 18 degrees. We have a copy of his letter that was produced after a meeting in England, where in that meeting he stated quite clearly, he says, in the UK before now people were using 12 degrees. Yeah, but clearly mentioned, this was clearly wrong. And he said that people should use 18 degrees for Fajr time. This was in 1983. And that was signed by many ulama at the time. Salim Dara, people know, we go to Leicester, most of Leicester follows 18 degrees. Mufti Shabir Ahmed from Darul Bari, his view is 18 degrees. I have his signature saying that. Okay, Mufti Yusuf Sacha, Mufti Ismail Barqadri from Kantaria. After the other time it was produced, the ulama who produced it sent an istifta, a question to Kantaria, to Mufti Ismail Barqadri, and we have the reply back. And the fatwa stated quite clearly 18 degrees should be used, and that this way of producing a title was incorrect. Okay? Mufti Ahmad Khanpur has got his views 18 degrees. So lots of views. Arab world, Asian world, their view is of 18 degrees. Move on. The question at this point normally people ask is that, okay, you've told all these views, all that is whatever else, but have you made any observations yourself? Have you gone to see Salat? What do the observation reports show? When you go and look for it yourself, then what happens? So alhamdulillah, from last year, lots of people used to ask us this question last year. So alhamdulillah, from last year we went for observations. Alhamdulillah, we're still going right now. If any brothers want to come along, I'll let you know when those happen, but it depends on the actual clear skies and stuff. And what's important about observations is that when people go for observations, sometimes we get mixed up. Sometimes we see a clear sky on top, and we say, actually, we can go observe the horizon now. But we're not observing the sky. We're observing the eastern coast of Fajr. So when you're looking at the eastern coast, we found that when we were observing, if there was cloud cover, even 30, 40 miles away, we couldn't see Subasai. If we went to the seaside to see it on the coast, and we thought if there was a small boat with a small bulb on the boat, small light, that made Subasai hard to see. And that's why when ulama had been to observe, Sheikh Muhammad Auda from Abu Dhabi, he's come up with some conditions that when you observe, you should try and do all these things. Of those things he says is you should be very careful about light pollution. We know that in the same way that the street lights, we can see because of the street lights on the earth. Same way the street lights actually reflect into the sky. And because of the street lights, we can't always see the stars. And that's why if you're in London, you can't generally see stars at night. But if you go right out far to countryside or wherever else, you look in the sky, you can see all the stars. It's because there's no street lights there. And that's important. So when we went to observe, we looked for a location, we looked for a location where it was completely dark. What we're observing was completely dark. And this is some research that we looked into. This is called a light pollution map. And what this tells us is that when you go to observe, these areas of intense colour, these are places where there's very strong, lots of light pollution. So if you're going to go observe the horizon, these aren't places to go. So you don't go make observation in London city centre because you want to see anything. You don't know Manchester city centre either. So when you observe, it's important that you observe where it's very dark and where you're observing is dark. So sometimes you're in a dark place, but you're looking at a place with lots of street lights. And if there's street lights, then you're going to see it much later on. Like sometimes, if this light was very bright right now, you wouldn't be able to see this presentation. Because this light would be too bright to make this possible to see. So So in the same way, if you go and observe Subha Sadiq in a place where light pollution affects it, then you will see Subha Sadiq much later than people who go to observe in a dark place. And this is important, that when people go to observe, you have to make sure that the conditions are right. Atmospheric conditions have to be perfect. Because when ulama have taken this into consideration, then the observations in the UK, and observations in Canada, and in Saudi Arabia, and in Pakistan, and in India, and everywhere else, give Fajr at the same time. When observations are not careful, when people don't consider light pollution, then Fajr time in the UK appears to be much, much later than the rest of the world. Now we're not talking about times here, I'm not talking about actual times. What I'm talking about here is where the sun is in relation to the earth. Because we know, obviously in Saudi Arabia it says hour 30 minutes, and here sometimes it's 3-4 hours. So you might say, how comes it's the same? It's not. I mean in terms of where the sun is. Because what the scholars do when they observe it, they write down the time, and they work out where was the sun at that time they observed. And that's why they found 18 degrees to be the most accurate. So you can see here, this no, just keep that. See here, what I've done is I've put red dots, these red dots here, and these green dots here. The green dots are observations where scholars have taken into consideration light pollution. So these are the ulama in Preston. When they went to observe, they were looking for Isha time, and you can see they're looking into a dark area here. The ulama of Batley, they went to Hull. Again, they were observing the eastern side, and they observed the dark area here. These are the observations we made in Walton Nace. Again, we're looking in here. So the green dots all show that 18 degrees accurate. And then with the red dots, these are the observation of the scholars in Blackburn who went to observe in 1987, 1988. And this is the basis of the timetable used across East London and across the UK really. It's the Hizbul Ulama Times or the moonsighting.com Times or the whatever you want to call it, the other timetable. So they went to observe here in Blackburn, and they observed both Isha time and Fajr time. What you can see around here, and this is one thing that I'm saying again and again, that no one's doubting the hard work, the sincerity of the ulama who've done that. No one's doubting any of that. And when we're discussing the issue, let's talk about the issue itself. If we're saying there's faults, I'm not saying it's because the person decided he was going to do this. What we're saying was there was an error in the way he went about it. Not my words, these are the words I thought I was saying exactly this. Okay? So you can see here, observation in Blackburn, you can see to the western side, it's got all that huge areas of light pollution here. So Isha time again, you would see it much earlier there. Fajr time, lots of light pollution around here. So if there's light pollution, then you only see Fajr time when it's much, much brighter than someone who would see in a dark area. And that's why you had the first fast issue, you had 105 or 108, and you had 315. Because if you're in a place where there's lots of light pollution, you won't see Subha Sadiq until much, much later. Because that light of Subha Sadiq is very faint. You can only see it under good conditions. And some people say, what about time in Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? I said, what about then? At that time, there were no street lights, so therefore there wasn't an issue about light pollution. They could look at the sky, and there wasn't an issue with that. It's an issue now because of light pollution. It's like, you know, okay, we haven't got much time, so. Okay, then you've got the observation we made in Walton, and some ulama last couple of years have been to observe in the Marcus car park in central London. Now, we can see there's issues with that as well. You're observing in central London, where you've probably got more light in central London than across the whole of Europe. So observing there is not going to produce results. And this is why Islamic history is something so powerful. That you see, when our scholars went to do something, they really thought things through. They gave conditions for things. Those of you who want to see observation of scholars in Canada, you see that when they made observations last year, you should see the conditions they put. They said they were going to go completely away from light pollution. They stood separately from each other. They wrote down the times. They took lots of factors into consideration. And then they came to the view that Fajr occurs at 18 degrees. Same with the ulama in Saudi. Same with the ulama in Pakistan. If you see the research done by Moulana Shabir Ahmad Kafakir, he's an engineer right now, and he's very close to Mufti Uthmani. Normally when we have questions for Mufti Uthmani, we ask him, we email him, and he finds out for us. Now, he went himself, was a student from Durham, Karachi, and he said he went to a desert place. He said it took him 40 days to get used to the night sky. He said when he observed for 40 days continuously, then he got used to what the night sky was. Then he started to see Fajr at that earliest time of 18 degrees. Before that, he said after a few days, I thought it was early as well. It's like right now, if you turn off the lights, everyone says it's dark. But if you were to ask a miner, is that dark? They say, no, it's not dark. The more you get used to darkness, the better your eyes are able to cope with it. And the more you're used to darkness, the easier you see faint lights. So even the most minuscule light, you have to see it in the horizon. Move on, Sean. Now, what about summer now? Now, in the UK, this was the fatwa of Mufti Mahmoud. What he said was, he says that as long as the sun reaches 18 degrees, will follow 18 degrees. The people in the UK should follow 18 degrees, as long as it occurs. When it doesn't occur, then there's other methods that can be used. Now what we've got to realise is the world is round. Also the world isn't straight, it's not directly parallel to the earth. It's at a tilt. And because it's at a tilt, we get seasons. Certain places have abnormal conditions to other places. So for example, everyone knows, North Pole has 6 months day, 6 months night. We know that. And that abnormality, that not being normal, that applies to all places above 48 degrees latitude. And let me explain this as well. Sorry, I'm going through the base, I'm explaining through the details. I know I'm sure there's people here that understand all this and know all this. There's others who are not too sure. So basically the way geographers divide the earth, they divide it vertically and they divide it horizontally. Vertically is known as longitude. Okay? We're not really discussing that. And horizontally is called latitude. So we're based about here, this line here. We're about 51 degrees latitude. From 48 degrees latitude upwards, we see that conditions become less normal. That means that from 48 degrees of 33 minutes, that location there has one day in the year where there's no night. When you go up, there's some place with 2 days, 3 days. In London, we have 2 months where there's no night. You go further, you go to Manchester, it's a bit longer, it's 2.5 months. You go to Scotland, it's 3 months. You go to Sweden, you go to Norway, it's longer. North Pole, you got 6 months with no night at all. So that's important to understand this. So we've got abnormal conditions. So the question is, what do we do in the UK? So what should we do for the 2 months? So in London, it's from May 22nd right up to July 20th. That changes slightly sometimes every year. And that's another thing that some people really don't understand. It's that we can't have a timetable correct every single year. Times change. We know it takes the Earth 365.25 days to go around. We only have 365 days a year. So therefore, every year there'll be a slight change. And that's why every year, this is good for people that are into the printing business, there has to be a new timetable. There has to be a new timetable. Okay? Because times change every year. You can't just take the same times from last year, this year, because it's changed. Okay? And next year, Fajr will be a different time to this year. So right now, those people saying 105, it's going to be 105 for 10 days next year. And that's not necessarily true. It could be different. Okay? Not much, but there'll be a few minutes difference. And that's important, we appreciate that. For Maghrib time, there could be 3 or 4 minutes difference. And we've got to take that into consideration. Okay, so we move on now. But despite the abnormality and differences, the beauty of our Sharia and our deen is that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has prepared us for all abnormalities. The hadith of Sahih Muslim is mentioned when Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was explaining to Sahaba about Qiyamah. He says, before the end of time, the Dajjal will come to you for 40 days. The first day will be like 1 year. The second day will be 40 days, and the remaining days will be like your days. And the Sahaba, immediately, the question they ask is that, will 1 day's prayer suffice for the whole year? Can we just read 5 the whole year? Okay? Nabi Sallallahu said, no, you can't do that. But you have to estimate. You have to work out how much would you normally read in that time period and do that. And this is why Imam Nawawi rahimahullah, Imam Shami rahimahullah, and lots of scholars have mentioned 4 methods that we can use in that 2 month period of time. So in London, from May 22nd to July 20th this year, next year may be slightly different, we can use 4 methods. The first method is Aqrabul Ayyam. So we look at the last day when we had night. What time did that happen? So May 22nd, it was the last night, was roughly about 1:06. So therefore, for 2 months, we used 1:06 for 2 months. That's not Aqrabul Ayyam. That is permissible. If someone, the reason why people like using that is because, not because they like making things difficult on people that are fasting, but because there's no jumping around them. There's no jump. You're not going from 1:04 to another method much later, 2 hours later, whatever else. It's all kind of uniform. And a lot of our, and Mufti Mahmoud Hassan Gangoy, when he came, he preferred Aqrabul Ayyam. He preferred that method. So all 4 are permissible, but that first method he preferred. Okay? The second method is nearest city. We look at which place is there a normal day and night. Yeah? So the closer place to us is a place near Rennes in France. It's at 48 degrees latitude, 33 minutes. At there, so what we could do is for 2 months when there's no night, we can take their time for Fajr and use that then. That would be perfectly permissible as well. Because Aqrabul Bilad. Once mentioned that, inshallah, we should all remain behind for food, inshallah. Sport the whole movement. Okay, first, we think about food right now. Fasting. Okay, the third thing is the sub or layl method. And this is also a method used by lots of scholars and accepted. This method says basically we divide the night into 7 parts. So we take from sunset to sunrise, we count how many hours we've got, how many minutes, divide that by 7. And the first 7, it roughly works out about 1 hour and 7 minutes right now. So the first 7 is for Maghrib time. Then 5/7 we use for Isha time. The last 7 we use for Fajr. This will make Fajr quite late. But again, we only use that for the 2 months. When it's 18 degrees from July 20th, then we have to use 18 degrees times. But for the 2 months we could have used that. The last method is half night, nisful layl. So we divide the night into 2. The first half we say is night, the second half we say is day. So the first half we can read both Maghrib and Isha, and the second, but we should try and make a difference between the 2. And the second half we can read Fajr time. That roughly works out very close to the nearest day method. It works out about 1 o'clock, 12:45 for most of the time. But the good thing about that is the times change throughout, but it can become quite early. So, okay, let me just sum up what I've said so far. Next thing I'm going to move on to is actually what about the other timetable? What's wrong with that? But before I do it, let me explain this again. That when the night occurs, then it's important we stop fasting at 18 degrees. That's important. That is when Fajr begins. I've shown you that through the work of our fuqaha, the astronomers for the last 1,000 years. I've shown you the fatawa and the opinions of our scholars today and also in the past. All of them have said Fajr time occurs at 18 degrees. Okay? The second thing I explained was that in the summer, when it doesn't happen, the sun never goes below 18 degrees. There's always some light in the sky. So then we can use these 4 methods. In London, that's for about 2 months. You go more north, it's for a longer period of time. So you can use these 4 methods. That's important. Let's move on, John. Now, before I move on to the other time, now Isha time. Now some people are of the view that Fajr and Isha should be symmetrical. And that is true. If you look at the views, lots of people say Fajr, if we say Fajr is 18 degrees, then we should also perform Isha Salah at 18 degrees. But if we were to perform Isha at 18 degrees, we'll be reading Isha right now about 12 o'clock at night. So we're already struggling to make suhoor. How are we going to do that? It's not physically possible. So what the ulama have said, that Fajr time is inflexible. We can't move that about, because it's based on the verse of the Quran. Allah Ta'ala said, eat and drink until the white thread becomes clear from the black thread. There we've got no scope. There's also no hadith in the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam where he states that you can combine Fajr with Isha. There's nothing like that. So therefore, Fajr time is inflexible. We can't move that about. However, Isha time, there is some scope for flexibility there. The reason for that, if we see the views of the 4 Imams, we see that Imam Hanifa is a strict in this regard. And he says you cannot combine Maghrib and Isha at all. except for one instance. So there is an instance. It's based on a hadith which is mentioned in Sahih al-Bukhari, narrated by Abdullah ibn Mas'ud anhu. It's in Mishkat, I think it's on page 513, volume 1, where it's mentioned that Abdullah ibn Mas'ud says that Nabi Sallallahu combined Maghrib and Isha in Muzdalifah. According to the other Imams, Imam Ahmad, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi'i, there are reasons when combining Maghrib and Isha can be done if the person has a valid reason. So therefore, in terms of Isha Salah, we find there's flexibility there. So therefore, Isha Salah, or the Fajr Salah, we can't do it after its time. We can't continue eating past Fajr. But for Isha time, there are ahadiths which clearly mention Nabi Sallallahu performed Isha before its time. There are ahadiths, and no one can deny that. Okay? And the combination happened as well. So therefore, for Isha, there's some scope there. Also, there's another view. Some ahadith state that Nabi Sallallahu performed Isha when the redness faded in the horizon. And other ahadith state it's when the whiteness fades in the horizon. The whiteness fades at 18 degrees, no doubt about that. However, the redness, people observe this is in the report by Moulana Shafi Patel. He mentions in his report that the redness is between 12.5 and 16.5 degrees. So therefore, for Isha time, there's lots of scope there. Okay? So what we're saying is here is that the ulama haven't said, you know what, we're going to punish the people of England and make them fast 22 hours or whatever. It's not about that. It's about saying where there is leeway, where there is scope, we say let's use it. So we read the Tarawih at 10:40, 10:30, 10:20, whatever else. That's fine, inshallah. We basically, I think this was to use the 1/7 method for Isha from March right up to October. Therefore, that Isha is completely okay. But Fajr, no, there's no leeway for that. So therefore, we have to use it. Okay, if you move on, Isha. Carry on. Okay, so go carry on. Okay. This is important. Let me just summarise. I keep doing this because I know some people get lost sometimes. And I'm a school teacher, so I know what happens. That when I start the question and answer, the first question will be something that I've answered like an hour before. So we keep repeating each other, there'll be less questions afterwards. And it's really important, those people who are looking forward to the Q&A session, understand that alhamdulillah, I've done this presentation across the country. And I've done Q&A sessions across the country. And I know roughly the questions that will come up. So in the presentation, I have tried to answer all those questions in passing. So inshallah, if you listen carefully, you will find answers to all the questions that inshallah you'll have. So what we've shown is that observations that have been done in proper conditions, UK abroad, shown Fajr is at 18 degrees. This is based on what? That Fajr is when that first light appears that spreads horizontally. That's what it's based on. Any timetable that points towards Fajr being later than 18 degrees should be scrutinized, and we should look at the observation results. Check where did the observations happen? Were they careful? In terms of definition of Fajr, in terms of where they were observing, in terms of the people that were there, what was going on there, and those things need to be scrutinized. Can you move on, Sean? And this is what the next part of the presentation is all about. It's about looking at the other timetable there, because what we're saying here is that those ulama who have scrutinised the other timetable have found huge discrepancies in it, have huge issues with it. So when the timetable was produced in 1989, it was sent to muftis across the world, and we've asked for these on a number of occasions. I request you as well to ask the scholars who have come with the other timetable to actually bring the fatwa. We've got two copies. We've got one fatwa which came back from Darul Karachi. We've got another fatwa that came back from Darul Kantariya, where the question asked was by the organisation who came with the other timetable. And Darul Karachi clearly mentions, it's the fatwa because it clearly says that the people who came up with this timetable, unke paas subah sadiq ke bare mein puri waqifiyat thi. That the people who came up with it, they didn't have the complete understanding of what subah sadiq is. That's Darul Karachi. The fatwa came from there. Mufti Uthmani signed the bottom of that. From Darul Kantariya, the fatwa came back and said you cannot observe in Blackburn and apply those times across the whole of UK. It's not correct. And both of them stated that people should use 18 degrees. So they asked the question, the answers came back. And no, we've got the copies and I can give you printouts of those things as well, inshallah. So this is the second claim, this is the evidence I'm going to speak through right now. The timetable that other Masajid are using right now is not acceptable according to rules in Sharia. That's what we're saying. Okay. So those people who are going to ask me afterwards, are you saying the other times are wrong? I've just answered that there. Okay. Okay. It's a lot of times in the UK that lots of Masajid you use another timetable. Some people call it the Hizbul Ulama times, some people call it moonscience.com times, some people call it Khalid Shulk, some people have the nerve to call it a unified London timetable. Okay? So it's all the same thing. So if I refer to any one of them, that's what we're talking about. Can you move on, Shulk? Okay. So the first issue is what I discussed with you already. We said the observation that took place in a place of heavy light pollution. If you're in a place of heavy light pollution, you will see Subh Sadiq much later than when you would see it if there was no light pollution. That was the first issue we discussed that. The second thing here is that we've got copies of the actual observation sheets. So the ulama went out and wrote down the observation times. And what we found was their observation times were different to the times given to the Masajid for the timetable. It's like, for example, if I was to say to you that, you know what, I've seen that first Fajr. Now, I saw it in Catherine, I just saw it there. But I want to continue eating for another half an hour. You say, you're crazy, what are you talking about? You just saw it, you told us that you've seen Fajr, and you tell me to eat for another half an hour. And this is exactly what this amounts to. Can you move on? I'll give you evidence of that, inshallah. This is the original observation sheet. I've got copies of this. At the bottom of this has the signatures of people who went to observe in black. So it gives you their signatures. Okay? So people like Yakum Iftahisab and a few others, their signatures at the bottom of this. And what it shows you here, it gives you the dated observations. So you can see here, if you look at the dates, you can see when the observation took place. So on the 2nd of May, 6th of May, 10th of May, 15th of May, 20th, 21st, 25th of May. Those are the dates they made. In June 6th and 13th, they observed. In July, you can see at the bottom, it's got a note there. It says it was rains and no observation took place. August, 2 observations took place as well. You have a full copy of that, I can give you that. But those are the observations. Now, so what we did was we looked at, first thing, what were they observing? And we found they were observing two things for Fajr. So number one here, the first thing they observed is that first light. And I told you that the first light is when the majority of the scholars say that is when Fajr begins. So that's the first thing they observe, which is light. And the second thing they observe is when that light spreads. Okay. So if we're saying now is that if they've observed the time, then the time that should be used in the time, then it should be this time. And we said that in a majority of scholars, there is a minority view that says use this time. So we could, possibly, for argument's sake, we can use that sometimes as well, if need be. However, what we found is we looked at their timetable, we found they didn't use any of those times. They used something in between. And that makes it difficult. So if you're saying you saw first light at this time, and you observed it when it spread at this time, then why is your time somewhere in between? Or even later than that sometimes. So let me give you some examples. Okay, so 21st of May, you can look at it here. Sorry, let me explain one more thing first. Is that what they did? When they did their observations, they sent a chart. Can you move to the next slide, and I'll move back in a second. Okay, this is the chart they sent. Lots of you might have seen this. If you've ever been part of a committee who produced timetables, you've seen it before. This is what they sent across the whole of UK. And they said, what you've got to do is, to make your Fajr time, you have to look at your sunrise time and take away the number of hours and minutes on this chart here. So for example, on January 1st, you've got to take away 1 hour 40 minutes from sunrise, and that's your Fajr time. For May 21st, which we're going to look at in a second, May 21st, you've got to take away 1 hour 51 minutes from your sunrise time, and that will give you your Fajr time. If you go back to the slides previously. Okay, now, so the question here is that, so they've told people to continue eating until 1 hour 51 minutes before sunrise. The question is, what time did they see first light? Their own observation sheet show they saw it 2 hours 22 minutes before sunrise. So what they should have done is wrote 2 hours 22 minutes there, and that would have been quite early. What they did do was they wrote 1 hour 51 minutes. They observed the Tabayyun time, which is also a minority view, 1 hour 32 minutes. But they didn't take that either. So they didn't take 1 hour 32 minutes, they didn't take 2 hours 22 minutes. They've got a middle time, 1 hour 51 minutes. And this is why scholars who have actually said, I'm going to look at the timetable and scrutinize it and look at the original observations, have said that there's no scope for following this timetable. Because one thing is, if they observe the time, and they said, you know what, we came to an opinion that 16 degrees is when Fajr occurs. We observed it and we want you to do that. You say, you know what, you've observed it, you've got your times that show that, and we're going to follow it, you scrutinize it. But what we're saying here is, they observed the time and said, continue eating for another half an hour. That is where ulama have major issues with that. Another example, 25th of May. They observed first light 2 hours 24 minutes before sunrise. They observed that light spread 1 hour 44 minutes. Recommendation time 1 hour 54 minutes. That means they've observed it and said, you know what, we've seen Fajr time, but don't worry about us. Continue eating for another half an hour. So the ulama who have issues with this is their main problem. That when you compare their book with the original observations, you find, you know what, there's a problem here. And that's why you get Patel from Darul Qur'an saying that these people were not aware of the issue of Subha Sadiq. Sheikh Muhammad Awda, who is a great sheikh in Abu Dhabi right now, he says, he talks about the black man observation, he's got Arabic Risala on this, and he says the issue is they didn't know what they were looking for. They didn't know what Fajr was. And that's a problem. Save list. Move on. These are other problems. Now, this is another, at the meeting they agreed, this is from their book, that they were going to use, for May and June they were going to use the Bayyun times. Yeah, when it spreads. Now, there's an issue with that agreement in the first place. And lots of ulama at that meeting, we spoke to ulama, listen, we didn't agree with it, however we were told to quieten down. We have reports from these ulama who were there at that meeting. But even then, which muftis have said it? I've shown you. I've told you, Mawlana Yusuf bin Nouri rahimahullah mentioned that if people keep eating into this time, their fast isn't valid. It should make qadha of their fast. So I'm telling you, these are views here. And even if it was valid, I've just shown you, they didn't use the Bayyun time. They've used another time. And therefore, there's no, if you move on. We go through their books all day. Now, other errors is that if you see their books, they say they made observations for the whole year. We only have observation records for 21 days. Of them, we only have 11 dated observations. So this is what we've asked Khalid Shogha, because Khalid Shogha has taken the observations. And he's saying that this matches the worldwide observation across the world. He said, give us the observation results. Let's look at the data. Let's look at where the observation happened. Then we can scrutinize it. Because we looked at the Blackburn observation, we found issues with them. So if you've got other observations which are showing a later time, let's see where it is. Sheikh Muhammad Awda again has looked at his observations, Khalid Shogha's observations, the ones he's accepted, and said that he didn't consider light pollution in his observations. That's why it's much later. Third thing, and this is a massive accusation, and obviously needs evidence, is that the observers who went out to observe, because if you look at the book, it says, Alhamdulillah, mashallah, we had experienced observers who knew exactly what they were doing. So last year, we interviewed the observers. If we move on, we should interview those. Okay. So last year we observed these two people are mentioned in their books. Also, it's also mentioned in lots of their leaflets that come out with Moulana Ahmad Salat and Patel. Both of them are kind of quoted to be experts in this field. So let's see what they say themselves, because they've never claimed to be experts. So this is the email that we've got back. This is from Moulana Hanif Budwa, who actually went to interview them, and actually, if you want, type it all up and send it to us. Okay, my recollection is that 2 or maybe 3 occasions, I was at this person's house in Blackburn during Ramadan after Rawi. We used to leave there late at night. And on these occasions, this person, took me in a car towards the area where the current Asda is, and told me he requested, see Subha Sadiq. I really did not know what was going on. If you look through the books, he's an expert, yeah? Okay. I did not know what was going on, but during trying to observe Subha Sadiq, and Mawlana Yaqub Ifdah, he said, oh, there it is. There it is. I just happened to be present at this person's house at those times. Let's see what Patel says. We can go through the whole email. Let's look at the last one at the end here. He says, at that time, I'd been in the UK for 6 years and didn't know anything about Subha Sadiq or Shafaq. So the people that are experts are themselves saying last year that they didn't know anything about what they were looking for. So what we're saying here is again, the flaws in this timetable are so numerous, are so many, that the ulama who have actually scrutinized it will never ever say, no, this is good and this is very good, or this one is better than that one, but the other one. They won't say that. You know, if people have been following in the past, inshallah, Allah will accept it, inshallah. You know, no one's saying go make qada with your fast, inshallah, Allah will accept it. But what we're saying is, those ulama have looked at this in detail, have said you cannot use these times for Fajr. You cannot use it. And you can see the reasons why. If you move on, inshallah. This is Fatawa Daram Karachi. I've quoted this in Urdu, I've already told you. 30th December 1990. We're in 2012 now. Still people haven't seen this fatwa. These errors of the Hizbul Ulama came about due to a lack of knowledge with regards to what Subha Sadiq is. And this is exactly what, this is the same thing that Sheikh Muhammad Awda from the Arab one also said. That people didn't know what they were looking for. Were they looking for first light? Were they looking for when it spreads? Were they looking for something in between? There was an issue there. Signed by Muftaki Uthman, it's 30 December 1990. Move on, Inshallah. Move on. Okay. So now, the whole question is here is, why should we accept, because our recommendations are this. And this is what, I travel all over the country, and the ulama who promote this, whether it's my master in Darag, or Mufti Yusuf Sab, or Sheikh Yaqub Qasmi, or the Muslim World League, whoever else, our recommendations are this, is that whenever night occurs, we follow 18 degrees. We use those times. Why? Because historically it's established. Historically it's established, and lots of our scholars today and in the past have followed it. Therefore it's established. Okay? And in Isha time, when Isha time becomes becoming difficult from about March onwards to October, there's some flexibility with Isha, therefore we use the 1/7 method from Isha, if you want, from that time. And when we read Isha slightly earlier, that will make it possible to read Isha, Tarawih, have Suhoor, and in time for 1:05, 1:10 start. So it's possible to do that. Those are our recommendations. Why? It's a question, why should we accept that? Firstly, it's supported by lots of people. Muftaki Uthman says it's research both scientifically and in terms of Sharia. And scholars, 99% of the scholars, he says, in India, Pakistan, are of the view Fajr starts at 18 degrees. And it's also supported by astronomers and experts in the UK, Saudi Arabia, Canada, Egypt, Pakistan, India. We've got observation results from all over the place. Also, as third thing is, this is not a reason really, but as in it's also something we should consider. It's also easy, isn't it? When you think about it, you perform Tarawih, you can worship the whole night, because the night's only 2 hours. Yeah? And have something to eat. Have something to eat, and then perform Fajr with Jama'ah, and then go to sleep. For Ramadan, it's actually not too bad, inshallah. But even if that wasn't there, we follow it for the other reasons, obviously. We'll move on, inshallah. Okay, we're going to stop there, inshallah. What I'll do now is, I just want to explain one other thing, because there's another question that will come up, and then I'll take some question and answers, inshallah. I'm going to be here probably another 15-20 minutes, inshallah. Just give us time for everyone to get ready for iftar and stuff. But the first question that normally people ask is, how many minutes before sunrise is Subha Salah? Lots of people ask that question, and they say, why can't you put it down to minutes? In Saudi it's 90 minutes. In India, Pakistan, we know it's about 90 minutes, so why can't you say minutes here? The crucial thing here is that, normally the answer I give is, I say, from Dhuhr, how many minutes after Dhuhr is Asr? People say in winter it's very short, in summer it's very long. So we're saying that it's the same thing for Fajr time. That Fajr to sunrise, in summer it's a very long time, in winter it's a very short time. Because when a day becomes longer, it doesn't just become longer from Dhuhr to Asr, it becomes longer from when Fajr begins, right up to sunset. Therefore the whole day becomes longer, and the whole night becomes shorter, not just parts of it. And that's important that we appreciate that, inshallah. What I'll do now, inshallah, I'll take some questions. Now what's really important is, inshallah, I will intend to answer as many questions as I can. And I'm trying to move quick as possible. Lots of people at this occasion like to give their own bayans. Yeah? But please, can we just a very short question and let's answer it. I know it's difficult. I know this is the issue which causes all sorts of problems around us. However, Iman caused issues in Makkah at the time of the Quraysh. That didn't stop Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. If we see at the time of our scholars in India, when it was rife, grave worship, all that was rife, it was an issue to speak out. They didn't stop. It's a difficult one. Can't discuss this one. There's no censorship in deen. Education is crucial, and that was the point of today, inshallah. It wasn't to cause any issues or anything like that. Okay, inshallah, any questions, inshallah? We'll start. Any questions? Oh, inshallah, so I've answered everything already. Inshallah, it's very good. Shall I make up my own question, inshallah? Go, yes.
Rob, just a point of clarification.
Yeah, go.
In terms of, the concept that you're saying here, in regards to the time for Fajr.
Can you speak louder so we can hear your question?
For Fajr.
It's fine, I'll repeat the question.
For start time for Fajr. is that enough the mosques that do adopt that during Ramadan? Is that also adopted before that? For example, you said from the 22nd of May to the 19th of July, that time is the time when we should be adopting this policy.
No, it's not the case. Let me clarify. Basically, those masajid or those ulama who suggest we should use 18 degrees, state we should use 18 degrees the whole year. Basically what happens is, for example, the sun, as I said to you during the presentation, is that we say Fajr begins when the sun is about 18 degrees below the horizon. So when it's at 18 degrees angle, we say that's when Fajr begins. Now, what happens in the UK, because of where we are, sometimes the sun never gets to this point here. Sometimes it only gets to about 15 or 16 degrees. So that's for 2 months of the year. Then we can use those 4 methods. But for the rest of the year, for Fajr, we should use 18 degrees times. So that means basically, 18 degrees times isn't always very early. It depends on the season. So in winter, it's actually maybe an hour and 40 minutes before sunrise. In summer, it's a lot longer, if you want almost 3 hours before sunrise. So just to answer you, the question is that those mosques who follow 18 degrees, do they do that all year round? The answer is yes, they follow it all year round as long as it occurs. When there's no night at all, they use an estimation method for Fajr time. Is that clear?
Yeah,
Go on.
but what, you don't do those 2 months that where there is no night period. The masjid that adopt your policy that you're saying now, that concept, do they do it for the whole of those 2 months, or is it just during Ramadan?
No, they do it right across. So for example, if you go to Leicester, 99% of the Masajids use that. You find like, for example, Masajids, they actually perform Fajr at 1:30 at night for a considerable period of time. If you go to Batley, there's certain Masajid, because Batley and Dewsbury, most 99% of them are on this timetable. Except for the no, but they have bigger periods. So for Leicester, it's slightly a few more days. In Batley, you've got almost 2.5 months. So for the whole period, they will use those times. It's saying this is being used in Scotland as well, in places in Scotland, and from even Glasgow, they use the 1/7 method, which is a bit later, which is much later, but they use that for the whole 2-month period. So it just depends on who you're speaking about and who it applies to, really. Yes.
Why don't Fajr go on 18 degrees?
Pashit Grove Masjid, there were meetings with, obviously, I'll come to that point in a second. In terms of Pashit Grove, we know both imams of Pashit Grove perform Fajar Salah here when they can. We know that. That should be enough, to be honest, but it's not. Last year, there was a big movement last year at Pashit Grove Masjid where the imams took it to the committees and said they wanted to change this. For whatever reason, it was decided they wouldn't change it. In terms of Up-to-Lane Masjid, we've discussed it. I won't mention names of ulama, but ulama in the Up-to-Lane area, majority of them are using this 18 degrees timetable. They've actually been to the committee and told them that they should follow 18 degrees. They've decided not to. Now, I can't answer more questions. All I do know is that in terms of the ulama in East London, I know the majority of them are following 18 degrees for the on-Fajr times. And I can tell you, those of you who come for Fajr here, right to it, that will see, whether it's the Imam of Plashet Road Masjid, whether the Imam of Selwyn, whether it's the Imam of lots of Masajid in the area, they perform the Fajr Salah here. The Forest Gate Masjid, lots of the ulama are of the view of 18 degrees. For whatever reason, maybe it's Masjid politics or whatever else, they've decided not to follow, as in the Masajid have decided not to follow time. It's a crucial, will make a difference between the view of the Imam and the Imams and the view of the committees itself and the Masajid. There's in East London, which is shocking, because I don't know, we've been to West London, and West London we found that when the Imam says something, people listen to him. So we had a meeting in West London, Regent's Park, we had 3 meetings there, with the representatives for 46 Masajid. Alhamdulillah, we gave a presentation there. After that meeting, 45 Masajid said we're going to follow 18 degrees. And they went back and they changed. Alhamdulillah, that's what I've lived in East London, but most of the bands I've given this Ramadan before were in West London. Right from Hendon, North Finchley, right across Southall. Tomorrow, again, I'm in West Drayton tomorrow. So in West London, where the ulama speak, the committee says, you know what, we're going to accept this. For some reason, there's an issue in East London, and that's why I'm speaking. For you to take back to your community, to your areas, to your Masajid, and say, you know what, If it's good enough for 45 Masajid in West London, if it's good enough for 99% of the Masajid in Leicester, in Batley, in Dewsbury, and other places, and I know those of you who have seen my website will know that I produce timetables for most places in the UK. This year I have had almost 50 requests from 50 different places for 18 degrees timetables. Places that I hadn't even heard of, whether it's in Wales or elsewhere. And in these places are now saying we're going to follow 18 degrees. So, alhamdulillah, the last 4 years we've been making this effort. It is making a difference. The crucial thing is, don't see it as anything I'm doing. I'm not doing this. This is not something that is a personal mission. With Mufti Sajid Patel, with my Imam Shurjurgas from Walthamstow Masjid, lots of ulama are working on this. Mufti Zubair Buttin in Bradford, lots of ulama across the country are working on this issue here. And alhamdulillah, we're slowly seeing a difference being made. And we're not asking for something new. We're not saying this is something completely different. We're saying let's go back to what the scholars have been saying for so many years. Let's go back to what Mufti Mahmoud Hassan Gungura stated in 1983 that people in the UK should do. Let's do what the Regent's Park Masjid, the Community meeting in 1984, what they said, let's do that. Not something new. It's not something that I'm just coming out from my own pocket or anything like that. Sure. Any other questions? Yes. This is, I wish I'd advertise on my website right now. But if you visit, the best website, easy one to remember, is wifaqululama.co.uk. You'll find lots of the articles I've written, Mufti Sajid has written, lots of other ulama around the world. We've got material, we've got all the fatwa from the Asian world, from the Arab world, all on this issue here. And you can look up all that. So wifaqululama.co.uk, you will see all those views there. Timetable, you can take one from here, if you live locally. Yeah, for the whole year, if you go on wifaqululama.co.uk, I've got timetables for 50 different locations there.
Moulana sir, I want to ask you one thing. As you said, that this practice was from last 1,000 years. So when it changed then?
89. In 1989, some scholars came up, made some observation in Blackburn. In 1989, they made some observation in Blackburn, they came up with a new timetable. In the UK, if we go back to the history of the UK, what we find is before 1983, in the UK they were using 12 degrees in the UK. So from when Muslims arrived in the UK, they were using 12 degrees. So what they did was they had a meeting in 1983 in Bradford, where they invited lots of ulama there, and they called Mufti Mahmoud Hassan from India. They called him here and said, make a decision for us. And in that meeting it was agreed that everyone would follow 18 degrees. That was the agreement in 1983. The Arabs weren't too sure, so in 84 they had their own meeting at Regent's Park Masjid. They also came to the view that it was 18 degrees. That was all going swimmingly and perfectly fine until 1989. In 1989, some scholars in Blackburn said, you know what, this time is too early, we're going to go and observe ourselves. They went to observe, but as I said to you, there were problems with their observations. So from 1989, lots of Masajid took on the other timetable, not knowing the complete facts about it. As I said to you, the fatwa we've got back, the ones we've got copies of, said there's issues with it. But those fatwa weren't put out. People didn't see those fatwa. When people got cold of them, they saw, you know what, there's actual issues here. And therefore they realised that what we've been doing previously from 1982 is what we should be doing now. And what people are doing around the world also works for us. And that's why, based on that, there were other observations in Hull, there were other observations in Preston, there were other observations that we've done last year, Walton Nays, and those observations have happened in the last 10 years. And all those observations have shown that actually the observation that took place in Blackburn, there were problems with that. That's what it shows. Does that answer your question? Yes,
a couple of questions. So some brothers asking, like, subhanAllah, that mentally or logically it is not easy to accept that the Isha, or we finish at Tarawih at 12 o'clock and just within 2 hours we have to do everything like a Sahri and then do Fajr as well. With, like earlier we said, just within 1 hour, 6 minutes we have to do all the cleanings. So logically...
let me explain to you logically first. Logically it doesn't make sense that any country should have 6 months night. 6 months day. Logically it doesn't make sense. Because we live in the UK and we're from places where that doesn't happen. But it does happen. Okay, if you were to go to the North Pole, you would see 6 months where there'd be no night at all. And logically, if we come down from the North Pole, Scotland, you will see 3 months where there's no true night. That does happen. If we're saying these places exist, then we're saying the amount of night, if we're saying this place where there's no night, then we've got to accept logically. So we've got a place where there's a normal night, and we've got a place where we accept there's no night. So we've got to accept that in between there's places with shorter nights until we get to no night. We look at it logically, we've got places where normal night, like places by the equator or places before 48 degrees. Then we've got North Pole, or we've got other places where there's no night at all. In between we've got places with very short night. Therefore, if you've got places with a very short night, then those places will have a 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock support time. Another thing is, with it logically, we're saying that we've got more hours in the day. So we're saying this from Dhuhr to Asr, we've got 6 hours now. Where have the hours come from? We haven't got 30-hour days now in the summer. The hours have come from somewhere, they've come from the night. So instead of night being 6 hours, it's now 3 hours or 2 hours. From a logical perspective, this is our last point again, is that the day now is longer. Those hours have to come from somewhere. It comes from the hours of the night. So therefore the day is longer, the night is shorter. Therefore, logically, inshallah, it will make sense.
Yeah. Well, it's the region part, Moses now accepting this 18 degree as well.
No. The regional partnership last year they had a meeting and they changed their time. They used to follow 18 degrees. After their meeting in 1984, last year they had a meeting and they said that it's very difficult. Basically, it was a group of 5 Masajid. We had a meeting there, we had 3 meetings at regional partnership. We said 45 out of 46 Masajid accepted 18 degrees. The one masjid that said that we're going to abstain was regional partnership.
Okay.
Now, we asked the scholars there, whether you're asking, if you ask the imams there, whether you're asking Sheikh Ahmed Shukri, who's the imam there, you ask the other imams, their view is 18 degrees is when Fajr occurs. However, last year they decided, from them and East London Masjid and a few other Masajid, they said, we're going to agree on a timetable, something that's convenient for people that everyone can follow. Yeah? They looked at this research, they looked at the whole research, they looked at the book presented by Mayap Miftahi, and they accepted those times last year. We met them this year and we said, what are you doing now? And they said, look, our timetable is still in draft form. We still haven't finalised things. They want to have another national conference inside. So after it was decided, we went to, so the scholars from the Fajar went to Imam Abdul Qayyum from Islam al-Masjid. Went to him before Jummah here, just announced that the timetable is changing. We're not going to follow the degrees anymore, we're going to follow the other timetable. So after Jummah, some scholars went to him and said, and showed him all those sheets that I've shown you now. And he said, have you seen all this? He said, you know what, we made a decision, we didn't know this. So they made a decision and they accepted, they didn't have all the information there. They went to Dr. Dubyan from Regent's Park Masjid. And again, the same question asked, did you have this information when you made your decision? And they said, no. What I'm saying here is we have that information. When we presented it to them, they said, you know what, we didn't have all this information there. But we can't keep changing every year. I don't see why not, but that's a question you can ask them. But they've decided they're going to follow the other one. We've got, as a public, as people responsible for our own fast, own salah, it's your job to find out whether the water you're making wudu from is clean. It's your job to find out if all your conditions of salah are met. It's your job to make sure that when you've got this information in front of you, you look at it, research it, go further, look at the Hizbul Ulama Times, call them here. In West London, they asked the people to come along on a number of occasions. It was refused. Said, I will not come to these meetings. So when someone says, I'm not going to answer any of these things, then what can you say? It's always a difficulty, inshallah. Are there any further questions, inshallah? Yes, ma'am.
The words on a ship, like you said, shouldn't the degrees be different?
Okay. If the world's on a tilt, then we're always on that tilt. We're always here. So what we're saying is what we're looking at, 18 degrees, is when the sun is 18 degrees to wherever we're standing. So even if we're on a tilt, degrees is based on because it's at a tilt, but it's still considered our horizontal. So we're at a tilt, but to us it still seems like that, doesn't it? When we're walking, like people in Australia don't fall down. Yeah? Because even though you're upside down, people don't fall down. So we're talking about the sun, but wherever we are, the sun can still be 18 degrees to your to where you are. What the effect the tilt has of the globe, it affects seasons. It means that every single year for us isn't the same. So we have differences in seasons. We have longer days and shorter days. There's a difference there. That's what it affects. But if you want, check out some physics websites as well. It's interesting to read, inshallah.
Two quick last questions. So one question is that, like, sometimes for the general public it's getting difficult. Like for those scholars, especially who it's nearly they know now this is the issue between 17 degrees and 18 degrees. But even by knowing that, they are still following some old timetable just because saying, oh, those masjids are following, like Central London Masjid is following, East London Masjid is following this. So they are giving the justification based on the other scholars or other, like a big masjid that they are following. That's why they couldn't be wrong. Or if they are not 100% right, then inshallah the masla will be on them.
I think first and also, lots of people say follow your masjid. In Sharia we have 4 sources of authority. We have the Quran, we have the Sunnah, we have the Ijma, and we have Qiyas. None of them are follow your local masjid. That's important. First, we understand that. Secondly, if we're looking at the practice of our ulama, where we're looking at in the UK or across the world, right from the last 1,000 years, we find that their amal has been on 18 degrees. It's crucial for people. And this is one thing that makes us separate to, say, Christians and Jews. We're not reliant on people for certain aspects. So we don't need a priest for forgiveness. We don't need an imam for forgiveness. We can all access certain information, and lots of information is available for us. That we respect ulama. What we've generally found is in the UK, the ulama who have researched this issue follow 18 degrees. Those who haven't researched this issue, they say different things. But again, in the Quran it mentions فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ. That if you don't know something, ask people in the know about that issue. Just because someone says someone's knowledgeable. When I first qualified, I didn't know about this issue. If you asked me that question, what would have been nice if I said to you, I don't know. So Ahmed Rahimahullah mentions that saying I don't know is half of knowledge. And this is crucial. That if someone doesn't know something, it's important they say I don't know, I haven't researched it. To say something is correct, having not looked at it, is by those scholars who have researched it, is not right, it's not fair.
The second part of the question, like people saying, like, because we are living in the minority of this country, like because of this issue, the minority is even getting divided. So is it not, or would it not be good, like the scholars were following 18 degrees, that's one type of sun or earth issue, and then the moon sighting issue. Would it not be better, even just for getting a unity point of view, would it not be tilt towards the 17 degree one day, or if they're not getting convinced, then what's the solution then?
Okay, the first thing here is that, alhamdulillah, in Sharia we see that the emphasis has to be on haqq, on what is true, on what is correct. And differences, if you think about it from an academic perspective, if you look at research papers and stuff, communities are considered to be intelligent because they've got lots of experts in different fields. One expert says this, another expert says that. That shows you're actually academically advanced. The fact that in Islam we've got differences based on academic knowledge, based on astronomy and physics and geography and all these kind of fields, shows actually how advanced Islam is. So from thinking about it from a non-Islamic perspective, it actually puts Islam in a different light. Like when we're talking about moon sighting issue, I know someone said talks about moon sighting, and let me just touch on it now, so we've actually covered that a little bit. But in terms of the moon sighting issue, when I sit with a non-Muslim and explain to them what the differences are based on, they're shocked that that these Arabs who were completely so detached from the world have been sent a message so complex, so detailed, and show that Islam is so true. And it is simple. We appreciate Islam, and if we look back and we see where our scholars were, like if you, for example, you compare the dates of Sharia, this is what I've done. If you look at the dates of, say, Hajj al-Wada, and you compare that date and look at it from a astronomical point of view, was it possible for that date to be the Islamic date then? It actually was. And if you look at every date recorded, you find scientifically, astronomically, those dates were completely accurate. So it tells you again the perfection of deen, and this is what it shows you. And in terms of what's true, the Quran mentions that people should hold on to bihablillahi jamia. People should hold fast to the rope of Allah. So unity isn't in just saying that, you know what, let's all agree on something and let's just do that. It's agreeing on something that we agree that is true. It's no point doing something that, no, just because everyone else is doing it. Saying that on this issue here, if you look at the Hizbul Ulama website, they basically say there's scope to use different times. So they actually say if someone uses 18 degrees is no issue at all. And we say if you do 18 degrees, inshallah, it's no issue at all. We say there's an issue with not following 18 degrees. So we all just follow 18 degrees, well, okay. Good to everyone. Because if they're saying their times are completely open, there's leeway there, scope there, then they're saying basically you can follow the other times if you want. Just don't say anything bad about our times. That's, if you read their page, that's basically what it says. So if we're saying it's going to everyone, we should follow 18 degrees then. However, that's another argument where you can present that to.
Okay, would there be any lecture for the moon sighting as well? Like some people are doing Eid or Ramadan and other days, and would you are going to present any
just
lecture?
on this, I think we'll end on this inshallah because we've got about 6-7 minutes before iftar. We have tried on a number of occasions to have meetings across the UK. We've invited, we've said to the other party, come forward, let's have a discussion. Let's have an open meeting. Let's have an agreement, let us sit down, and we'll call whichever ulama that you respect across the world, we'll call them there, we'll present our facts, you present your facts, whatever they come to, we'll agree. And we put it in writing. The other party has said on more than one occasion, we will never ever go to any meeting. That's what they said. And how do you debate, discuss it with someone who doesn't turn up to the table? If we're looking for unity, we need people to come to the table. And this is why we're educating people. Because it's through educating people that people can actually tell the people that let's have a meeting now. This meeting that's in writing that we have said that we'll have the meeting, we'll discuss it. Just come to the table. You call whichever alim you want from from wherever you want, someone independent, call them and let them make a decision. But they've said we will not do that. We will not have any meetings. In Regent's Park Masjid, we said we invited him there. I will not come to any more meetings at Regent's Park Masjid. And this is the difficulty we've got here, that we're discussing an issue which is so important. So important. And we want unity. No one's doubting that. Right now, those people who live local, for them, they knew about the 18 degrees times. People who further on, they don't know about it. So accurate Salat has become like a postcode lottery. If you're in the right postcode, West London, 45 out of 46 Masajid following it, then it's fine. I was just born in the right place. And if you're born in the wrong place, then you've got the wrong times there. It shouldn't be like this. Ulama should be able to sit around the table and discuss this. And inshallah, what I've shown you today is inshallah not my words. These are the words of our ulama. Whether we're talking about recent, whether we're talking about in the past, whether we're talking about in the UK, we're talking about abroad. We're talking about the majority of the ulama. Muftaqi Uthmani mentions 99% of the ulama are of the view that Fajr time occurs when the sun is 18 degrees below the horizon. The same, they said, there's Patel from Delban, from all over, saying exactly the same. The Muslim World League says the same thing as well. That's basically Moscow. So across the board. So we're looking for unity. Let's have that meeting. And ask people to actually call for that meeting. And then we can come to an agreement. If there's no meeting, then we can't do it. Just can't do it.
There was a lecture about like this gathering, about the moon sighting. Would you be able to kind of...
Moon sighting now?
Not now, okay. Inshallah, later on.
Okay, we can cover moon sighting at another time. I've got 2 minutes now. Do you want me to briefly mention it? Or
No.
Do justice?
Next week.
Next time, inshallah,
yeah,
you can see, inshallah. As long as it's available, inshallah, see why not. Moon sighting is also another very, very important issue. Inshallah, we can discuss, inshallah. We're going to stop. Any more questions? Take one more question, we'll stop, inshallah. Any more questions?
What about 90 degrees people who are saying that 90 degrees okay and we are following 18 degrees? You said in the chart.
Okay.
19 degrees.
90 degrees, it's a view, but again, 90 degrees is much earlier.
No, from us lot, we can see that 18 degrees and 19. But for those lot who are seeing as 19 degrees is the Salif, so for them is like that one. Because the reason scientifically you can say that some creatures, they can hear different frequencies. Like human being, they can hear up to 20,000, whatever it is. And the other creature, they can go beyond that. So same thing, it could be possible for them that they can see before 18 degrees that Subha Salih.
Okay.
Because if they are got very good eyesight.
First thing what's important is that we understand that 18 degrees, although it's based on observation, it's also, if you look at light intensity charts, light intensity chart, what that does, it measures the light in the sky. The question is here is, when is there no light in the sky? And the astronomers have come to agreement that there's no light in the sky at 18 degrees. Although historically there were views of some scholars of 19 degrees, which will mean the first fast will probably be about 12:45 or half 12 at night or whatever, be much earlier, and there'll be a longer period of persisting twilight. However, no one in the UK is of that view. No one in Europe is of that view. So therefore, I've never had that question before. But it's almost unheard of. In Makkah Mukarramah they generally use 19 degrees for the first adhan, and they perform Salat 18 degrees. There's only about a 4-minute difference there. But as in, it's unheard of, 19 degrees. It's a very rare view. So therefore we'll take the majority. We'll go with the majority when it's run. Any further questions?
Is anybody neutral in refereeing who's in between all of this basically? Grabbing the differences and saying, no, these people should be adhered to more than you. Is there any referee basically?
This is what I'm saying. In terms of, if you see the documentation provided by Hizbul Ulama, their books, they state they've got a number of fatawa supports what they've done. We've asked for the fatawa, they have not provided them. What we've done is we've got 2 fatawa that they've questioned. We've got them, we've got it from other ways. We've got one from Darul Karachi, which states that it's wrong, and we've got one from Darul Kantari, which also states that it's wrong. So if there are neutral people, we haven't met them, people who have actually scored out the time. Is there anything else? Shall I let this finish? It's almost iftar time. Now to accept this, it's really important. It's a matter of deen. Now, if you're speaking to anyone else about this issue, it's very important that we use language of respect to deal with this. This is an aspect of deen. Let's not embarrass deen when we talk about these issues of deen. It's very important that we tackle it properly. Let's not put people off learning deen and understanding deen through the methods that we use. And that's important. We do it properly. If we're going to approach our Masajid committees, we do it in a proper way. Not through creating fiascos in Masajid or causing chaos elsewhere. That is not permissible and that is not correct. And that is not what I'm calling for, inshallah.